Welcome everyone to today's seminar. It's great to have so many of you online to hear a range of inspiring stories, helpful tips and useful advice from successful women in the international export market. My name is Virginia Birrell and I'm the CEO of the Australia-China Business Council in Victoria, and I will be your moderator for today's session. We have an exciting event in store for everyone today, and allow me to provide a brief outline of things before we get underway. We have with us an exceptional panel of exporters, international business advisors and cultural communications professionals who will provide a complete and holistic picture of China's export market from a range of viewpoints and sectors. Let me introduce Ines Liu, the manager of Dezan Shira Associates, Billie Stapleton, Managing Director, Montara Wines, Director, Billie Stapleton Meat Exports, and Public Relations Manager for Ararat Meat Exports, Australia. Sheridan Wright, the International Sales Manager from Natio, and Leonie McKeon, China-educated strategist, business consultant, author, workshop presenter, and keynote speaker. In the spirit of increasing female participation in Australia's export sector, ACBC Victoria is delighted to partner with Global Victoria Women, an initiative of the Victorian Government's Global Victoria, to deliver today's online event. You'll hear shortly from Jason Fitz of Global Victoria. There'll be 4 sessions today: on the ground, setting up your business in China, how I did it, understanding cultural nuances to help you succeed, and a Q&A session. We hope you'll all leave with more knowledge, be better prepared and emboldened to enter, expand or diversify into the China market, which remains Australia's #1 destination for exports, and where almost 1/3 of our export income comes from, over double that of second place Japan and 9 times that of the US. Some quick housekeeping. Today's webinar is being recorded, and a copy of that recording will be sent to you after the session, along with speaker presentations and the contact information should you wish to keep the conversation going after the event. The team at Global Women Victoria, headed by Daniela Maskey, will be pleased to hear from you too. We have a Q&A box open for the entire session today, so please feel free to send any questions you have through. We'll have a dedicated Q&A session at the end, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can. The chat function is also open, and we'd like to encourage cordial discussion. Feel free to share your contact details, LinkedIn, and network with others. I'll now pass over to our colleague in the Victorian Government, Jason Fitz, Regional Specialist for China at Global Victoria, to provide a brief introduction and state government overview. Thanks, Jason.
Thank you, Virginia. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the lands we meet on today. I pay my respects to their elders, past and present, and the elders of other communities who may be here today as well. Look, our event today is part of the Global Victoria Women Initiative, which aims to empower all women in business. Global Victoria does this by helping women expand their networks, upskill, growing their organisation and celebrating their achievements. Today's event does just that. To stay up to date with the Global Victoria Women's activities and other events, please do have a look on our website at Global Victoria, because they'll have this and they'll have other future events that are coming up as well. I'd also like to thank Virginia and the ACBC team for the tremendous amount of work that they put in for this event and for all the other events they've done this and last year. I think that continuing to encourage trade with China is vitally important now that the pandemic and diplomatic difficulties have made engagement more complicated. It's also vital that we rebuild and extend our trade relationships, but while we're doing that, it's actually important, I think, that we rebuild better than we were before. And that, to me, is where today's discussion comes in. Global Victoria is determined to reach out to more members of the Victorian community and build a more inclusive export sector. And what we're aiming on doing is getting Victorian women who are in business to help them and support them achieving their exporting journey. I look forward today to hearing the stories of experienced exporters and also the questions of attendees who are with us today. I also encourage attendees to stay in touch with the ACBC and Global Victoria. You can do that through our website, which has a number of programs that we offer for Victorian exporters. And of course, the ACB website through Virginia and Zach is a great contact point. Recently, Global Victoria partnered with the ACBC for our Global Alliance program. And through this program, the ACBC will be rolling out events, training and speakers to help exporters to China. I hope and look forward to seeing many of the people, both speakers and attendees, joining in on those activities. But for today, welcome everyone to the Global Victoria Women's Network and this great talk. Thank you, Virginia.
Thanks, Jason. It's always a pleasure to partner with you and Global Victoria. You're terrific supporters, so thank you again. Now, let's start with the basics. How do you set up your business in China? 101. So to provide an in-depth information session and her expert's advice, I'm delighted to introduce our first speaker, Ines Liu, who is joining us from on the ground in Shanghai. Ines will provide a comprehensive overview, including considerations, legal requirements, how to successfully establish your business in country, e-commerce options, and more. She's the Managing Director of Dezan Shira Associates Beijing office and a member of the International Business Advisory Team. Her company is one of China's most well-known independent business and tax consultant practices. She advises foreign investors on market entrance strategy, corporate structuring, cross-border tax issues, FDI in China, and Asia-related issues. Thank you so much for joining us today. Notebooks at the ready, everyone. We look forward to hearing your insightful presentation. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much, Virginia and Jason, and good afternoon to all of you. I'm so grateful to be one of the speakers and to be with you all here virtually though. One sentence to summarize our firm's mission is to guide investors through China and Asia's complex regulatory environment and assisting with all aspects of establishing, maintaining, and growing business operation in the region. It's 10 minutes for me. It's quite challenging in terms of what I'll be sharing. Yeah, let's just get started. Yeah, either exporting your products or services, you can achieve it through having a formal presence in China or without a commitment of establishing a formal presence. For example, I think cross-border e-commerce is a good option. Yeah, so key considerations of setting up an entity in China. Yeah, we'll start with the negative list. So this is one of the best sources of preliminary information to understand the lay of the land in terms of foreign investment in China. First introduced in 1995, the catalog has been amended many times and typically to reflect changing national economic and industrial policy goals. The negative list is the list of industries in which foreign investment is either prohibited or restricted. So for companies looking to enter any restricted sectors, usually only accessible for foreign investors through joint venture structure with Chinese companies or individuals. So if your sector that are not on the negative list basically means there's no special requirement for you. And you can see from this graphic, the two negative lists have continued to reduce the number of measures limiting access for foreign investment for 4 years in a row. So compared to 2019 negative list, the 2021 national one has cut the number of restricted measures from 40 to 33. And 2020 free trade zone negative list has cut the measures from 37 to 30. So it's definitely a much welcome step for global investors as it shows China is still open its market to the world. So for those who targeting the Chinese market, you should definitely pay attention to the negative list. So setting up an entity in China is not a rocket science, but to figure out the most appropriate investment structure is very important. As a representative office here, it's very limited in commercial capacity and cannot engage in profit generating activities and normally provide very service level local support and oversight. And RO is a good option for foreign business that wants to maintain quality control, for example, in China. And it can also be like a very effective way to improve the efficiency of communication with your Chinese partners or local suppliers. In comparison to the RO, the wholly foreign owned enterprise, investor often set up a WFOE as a limited liability company. So the WFOEs provide greater freedom in business activities and also offer for investors 100% ownership and management control. So foreign companies that wants to invest in restricted sector, as we just discussed in a previous slides, it's a legal requirement to develop a joint venture form. So that means like you have to form a joint venture with a Chinese partner or a Chinese individual. Other conditions that could be like the foreign companies, they want to take advantage of, make the sales channels or distribution networks of a Chinese partner. The chops. The legal stem and the chops grants great power, and using a company chop, someone could actually change the structure of your China-based company and allow control of it to be signed over to another group or individual. So documents are rarely ratified in a Western manner with a physical signature instead of a printed seal. So a very quick story I would like to share. So once upon a time, there's an American guy opened a business in China. It was difficult to find any information on the chop system. So it's such a common practice that for Chinese, it needs no explanation. So his first Chinese general manager reminded him of the day he asked for his resignation. So the Chinese general manager took the company chop hostage, and he told the American guy, the controller of the chop is a controller of the company. And in the end, through a great deal of negotiation, the American businessman was able to get his chop back. So it happens in the WOFIs, the joint ventures, also in the Chinese domestic companies as well. So in terms of securing chops, you can delegate control to a trusted employee and make sure you establish internal controls to regulate and lock their use. Or you can also outsource a trusted third party to custody the chops. Profit repatriation strategy for all multinational corporations operating in China. The repatriating profit from their subsidiaries has always been an important but super challenging issue. So China maintained, that's one of the reasons is the China maintains very strict system of foreign exchange control. So meaning this, the funds flowing into and out of China are highly regulated. So other laws, regulations, such as like company law, relevant tax regulations, as well as China's transfer pricing rules impose additional barriers to profit repatriation as well. So in this environment, business people need to understand and incorporate a profit repatriation strategy from the very beginning. So there are several ways to repatriate profit from China. The most obvious is for the company's China-based entity to pay dividend directly to its foreign parent company. However, this is subject to certain prerequisites. So as an alternative, you can also use intercompany payment, such as services fee and royalty, to remit profit from China. For example, by charging for supporting services or licensing intangible assets as a royalty payments provided to the Chinese affiliates. So section 2 is selling without an entity. Cross-border e-commerce is a very attractive channel for foreign business to sell to China, as it allows them to access millions of Chinese consumers without a commitment of establishing a formal presence in China and a relatively low cost. Particularly, I think for certain industries like cosmetics, personal care products, baby and maternity products, apparel, appliance, etc. But before we jump into the cross-border e-commerce model, I want to emphasize, like, when you have that idea in your mind, you need to firstly protect your trademark in China. Why? The most important thing I think you need to know about China's trademark is China is the first to file country. So which means that whoever first secures the trademark generally gets it. So, and also bad-faith registration is common. A Chinese company first registering the trademark of a foreign company, and their intention is to sell it back to the foreign company at an inflated price. So this is also one of the reasons we're always harping on the needs to register your trademark in China, is in addition to being a first to file jurisdiction. And I believe the former president from the United States, Donald Trump, and did a really good job on it. And he has launched about 100 trademark applications in China for the Trump name, and everything from pet care products to computer software to lingerie and to golf clubs. So again, I think trademark registration is the first thing you need to do it before you set your foot in China, or when you have the idea to selling to China in your mind, which is also applicable for those who intend to do business, either setting up your legal entity in China or without an entity. And I would say especially important for those who do not have a formal presence in China. I just used Tmall Global as a China's largest cross-border online platform to give you a big picture with certain level of details. I believe it's easy to find relevant information to set up a store at Tmall Global. Just to highlight one, the goods sold on Tmall Global are originally produced and sold overseas, then imported legally into China. And Tmall Global allows foreign brands without a Chinese business entity to sell to consumers directly by opening their exclusive flagship store. And after March 2015, the company are required to use authorized third-party service provider. It's called like a trading partners. The trading partners role has integrated all the function of industry chain into a single comprehensive service provider. Tmall Global has, I know, also including like Jingdong, like JD, they have their own cross-border e-commerce warehouse and logistic teams. And normally foreign brands work with these cross-border e-commerce platform giants directly, and some trading partners with competency in logistics can also recommend other cross-border e-commerce warehouse and domestic logistic providers, which generally are cheaper than Alibaba and other large cross-border e-commerce platform. From policy level, where Chinese government has been promoting cross-border e-commerce with many policies to support, like in January 2020, the China added 50 cities and the whole Hainan province, that island, like orange here, you can see down south, the whole into the pilot program of cross-border e-commerce retail importation. So now the country has a total of 86 cross-border e-commerce pilot cities, as well as the Hainan Island. So different from general trade, the China's cross-border e-commerce retail importation program is designed to make it easier to import certain foreign goods for Chinese consumers' personal use in order to satisfy the growing domestic demands. Pilot cities which join the cross-border e-commerce retail importation program can conduct more convenient import, like the imported retail goods can be temporarily stored at the boundary warehouse before being delivered to the customers. And a prerequisite condition, these policies usually own their free trade zones, comprehensive boundary zones, and act as logistic hubs with trading partner countries. So there are basically two models or two modes for foreign companies engaging in cross-border e-commerce business. And first one, we just mentioned, like goods are purchased in advance and temporarily stored in a bounded warehouse in China. So after consumer place an order, the customer clearance and deliver will be carried out immediately from the bounded warehouse. Then the products can be delivered to consumers by a logistics company, and this mode requests a large inventory, but goods can be quickly delivered. And second mode is called direct shipping. So in this scenario, consumer place an order through cross-border e-commerce website. Then the overseas suppliers and sellers directly deliver the products to China by international couriers. The product will need to go through the custom clearance process to be released to the consumers. So this mode primarily is for small-scale B2C model, and does not require domestic inventory, but it's more complicated than bounded importation because of the deliver arrangement. The customer satisfaction also may be impacted depending on the efficiency of the international transportation. I want to be very brief to touch base on tax burden of e-commerce transaction. Since January 1st, 2019, the government has increased the duty-free quota on a single transaction up to RMB 5,000, and the annual quota per person from now is up to 26,000 for retail imports. So over this limit, consumer will need to pay full general import taxes, 3 types, including tariff, value-added tax, and the consumption tax if applicable. Yeah, now it's like a wrap-up time. It's definitely more than 5 tips. Yeah, so just want to echo the current uncertainties are so real, and there's a lot of like unforeseen hurdles, and also not to ignore. So it's getting sometimes so hard to believe we're not in a simulation that runs every possible scenario at once. But that being said, I believe it actually creates a great sense of urgency to grow different models, channels, and when doing business in or with China. So better equipped for foreign companies, either you directly do business with your Chinese partner or through setting up your legal entity before exactly your business structures. It's important to learn the latest law and regulations surrounding entity setups, requirements, also inquiry about due diligence. It's very important for would-be partners, vendors, service providers, obtain advice on any operational issues, including China labor law and regional regulations. Some companies, foreign companies, are still under the assumption that because they have registered their trademark in their home country, it will be protected in China. However, the Chinese system does not recognize trademarks registration in other jurisdictions and will grant protection only to those who first file in China, regardless the use or intent to use. The fourth one is profit repatriation. Again, it's always, literally always a pain to foreign invested enterprise. Remitting profit as a dividend is the most straightforward way, but a very expensive in terms of tax burden. Intercompany payment is a comparatively more convenient and tax efficient alternative, but it's also subject to high level of scrutiny from tax authorities, and it shall be built up with business substances as well. So I chose the last one because I saw the pandemic changed many things on the workplace dynamic. The business process are being changed. So to better manage business risk, it has brought to light the need to develop for exit strategy and the business continuity plan. I'll stop here and I'll have my contact information, also a few slides after this. I find it's quite useful. I think ACBC Victoria will share with you all, and I will give the floor back to Virginia.
Thanks, Ines. We could devote a whole session to this, and I really appreciate your very brief snapshot. So sorry to have rushed you, and please, to our attendees, do feel free to reach out to Ines to get some more information, and I'm sure she'll be able to, only too happy to help you. So now we've got this very brief groundwork established. It'll be interesting to hear from two women who've had that first-hand experience and have had success in exporting to China. Firstly, Billie Stapleton. She's prolific in both the wine and the meat industry settings as Managing Director of Montara Wines and Director of her very own Billie Stapleton Meat Exports. A regional player, Billie is also, as I mentioned earlier, a public relations manager at the Ararat Meat Exports Australia. So she's been concentrating on international trade, spending several weeks a year in China, and eventually established the Montara Wines office in Shanghai. And she, like all of us, are really missing that ability to go to China to do business, because it's a real important element of the way we do business. She became export manager in 2013, generating new business in Hong Kong, China and Indonesia and the USA, and took over the reins of general manager in 2016. And then she took on a managing director role in 2019. Joining Billie will be Sheridan Wright. Sheridan is in her 8th year as International Sales Manager at Natio Natural Australian Beauty, where the Chinese cross-border channel is an important growth focus for the cruelty-free brand. Natio was established in 1993 and is a proudly Australian-owned and operated company. Since then, Natio has grown to be an iconic Australian brand, offering a broad range of quality products for the entire family, with over 90% of all their products manufactured right here in Australia. Sheridan has 20 years of experience exporting Australian brands to Asia, Europe, and the USA and the Middle East. And her background concentrates on beauty and food industries, having worked with such brands as Pura Milk, King Island Specialty Cheese, Tasmanian Heritage Specialty Cheese, Berry Juice, Big M, Dairy Farmers, and Farmers Union. So I'm delighted to set off the question and ask each of you, if Billie would start, to just tell me briefly your China story.
Sure thing, Virginia. Thank you. Hello, everybody, and thank you for having me today. Well, my family has a very close connection with international trade. We've always been in trade. But 11 years ago, I was sitting at home watching TV, and I saw the Premier of Victoria in China doing a big delegation with lots of wineries. And I thought, you know what, that's where I want to be. So I actually called up the VicGov and said, how do I get involved? And they were fantastic. They called my brother and I in for a meeting. It actually was with Commissioner Brett Stevens, and he helped us organise ourselves for the next trade mission to China. And that really helped us get a feel for the country. And we just fell in love with the people and the story. And that's how it sort of all began for us. And from there, I would just travel every year, many times a year, up to 20 trips in a year, to understand the market, to understand the people, and to have just a really good comprehension of what we could do in the market, and have that willingness to trade with each other, and have the friendship that I find in business in China. Yes, well, I mean, is there any specific questions?
Did you? Well, I think that's probably a good overview of how you started, and particularly leveraging off the expertise in the Victorian government is a terrific, that's terrific advice for anyone new to the area. Sheridan, would you like to add your comments on how you got involved in this?
So yeah, thanks everyone for having me and for listening to me today. I'm really excited to share Natio's story with everyone, and I hope that everyone gets something out of it. So did you want to know how I started in exports, or how Natio?
I think your story is interesting because it's very broad, because you've got food as well as cosmetics. So.
Yeah. Well, I've actually got a life before food as well. So I actually cut my teeth on international business when I was working at a key tag manufacturer in Brunswick called Chevron Key Tags. And they actually, so if you've ever had a little plastic key tag with a little Australian made icon in the insert, that's Chevron. They were a family business. They're still running today. I think they've been in business for over 50 years. And they mostly exported to Canada, USA, and to Europe, not to Asia at all. So I started there a long time ago, longer than I care to admit. And that's where I was, cut my teeth as an export coordinator, and thought it was just really interesting to be talking to different people around the world, as opposed to the Kmart buyer or something like that. Not that we love our Australian buyers as well. But yeah, I really liked the aspect of learning about different markets through my customers. So it was super interesting. And then I went from there, I went to Lion Dairy and Drinks for 8 years. So that was a transition from a very small Australian family business to a large conglomerate that was had just been bought by San Miguel and was being merged with Berry Juice. So we had a large international team in Malaysia, Singapore, Hong Kong, Taiwan, and yeah, we had to merge the business together with the juice side and the dairy side. And then a year later, San Miguel sold Lion Dairy and Drinks to Kirin. So we were then working for a Japanese owned business, and that changed the international business again, and our international department grew again. So after 8 years at Lion, where we did launch a lot of Australian dairy into China, I moved to health and beauty. So I moved to Natio, and Natio had been knocking on the door of China for years, but it was never possible because of animal testing requirements for skincare into the general trade. But we knew that Chinese consumers really loved the product, and it resonated really well with a lot of Chinese tourists that would come through Shenzhen into Hong Kong and buy the product through there. And we ended up launching into China proper off the back of the Daigou frenzy that opened up in about 2016. So, and really reached its dizzying heights in 2017-18. And it was obvious that Natio was really in the right place at the right time when the Daigou channel exploded. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to?
I think probably it would be nice to perhaps enlarge on some of that, saying, so you've had broad experience through food and cosmetics. What didn't you expect to happen? You know, what was some of the major hurdles that you had to overcome that you didn't expect when going into the China market?
Well, yeah, it was because Natio started with a really strong Daigou base. Once we really nurtured our Daigou fans, and we just thought that they were fabulous, and it helped us get comfortable with the whole idea of cross-border e-commerce. So, to be honest, I didn't even expect cross-border e-commerce to exist. It was the general trade and China, you know, was quite regimented and restricted with regulations. But all of a sudden, cross-border e-commerce came about, and we had to really do some due diligence. Is it really a cruelty-free channel? Is it legitimate? Is it more than a test or a pilot? Does it have longevity? So while we were going through that stage, we nurtured our Daigou and Taobao trade merchants as much as we could. And then once we got, about a year later, once we got comfortable with it, we thought, okay, we need a flagship store. We need our own flagship store. And we did look into that. I guess we were quite surprised at the level of complexity around owning a flagship store. There's financial hurdles, there's a lot of upfront costs, there's contractual complexities that an Australian business might find daunting. Yeah, so that was quite a surprise. And in the end, because Natio is a small to medium family business and is quite risk averse by its approach, and rightly so. The hurdles of owning our own flagship store as a brand, which on paper is the right thing to do, it just wasn't going to happen, you know, a year into trading, which came quite quickly, and sometimes in business, easy come, easy go. So we really were cautious and chose not to commit to that level until now, where we're actually transitioning into brand ownership of our flagship stores now. We chose to have a distributor model and have the distributor / TP run the stores for us. It was and it worked well. And so if you are facing that situation where you'd love to have a flagship store, but the business case isn't really holding water, or it's a different model to what your business might be comfortable with, it's very different to a normal distribution model, perhaps it is an option to have a distributor model and have someone else own those stores. But my only advice would be just be very open with your intention that one day the brand is going to want to own that asset again, and perhaps have a letter of understanding to say that you know, everyone will be ready and willing and helpful in that transition. It will help as when you get to that stage. Our distributor has been so helpful and understanding in that transition that we're really grateful for. If you don't have that sort of relationship, though, you might have to completely shut down your store, exit the platform for a year, and then start again in a year's time fresh. So yeah, it's great that to have flagship stores, but they're quite complicated, and it's a big deal to run your stores as a brand yourself.
That's terrific advice. And Billie, I think you're nodding there. I've got a couple of questions actually have come through from you. So perhaps I'll ask both of those and then comment. The first one is your company selling products to customers directly or B2B? And then the other question is, what do you see the role that Chinese business migrants play in wine exporting? What percentage of wine is exported by migrants? Given the tensions between the two countries, what do you think about exporting wine to China? So there's a few.
Well, I think people have to understand that in trade, where mums, dads, brothers and sisters, all working hard to try and make a living, and that living is wine. So I've had, over the last 15 years, I've had so many people trust in Montara in China and trust our brand and develop our brand. So there is hardship on the Australian side and hardship on the Chinese side, because they've been behind us with that brand for many years. So they're obviously struggling too. With me, what I did, I moved and pivoted. I used all my connections from wine, and I thought, well, that door is now closed for now, so I'm going to go into meat. I was lucky that my family was already in the meat industry, however, not trading directly into China. And my way of doing business is to partner up with a Chinese company, one that I trust, people I really know well. So that all the relationships that I'd made with wine turned into wonderful relationships in meat. So it's a new learning curve for me, but I do have great support in my partners. With the immigration question, yes, there is a role to play with immigration and wine, and I definitely have been involved in that space. However, we made sure that we worked very closely with our immigration people and protected our brand, protected our price, and did everything by the book. So I think also we've had some wonderful immigration stories of our team, our Montara Wines team and our Billie Stapleton Meat Exports team, people that have immigrated from China to Australia as students. They finished their university here in Melbourne, which they enjoyed, and then they came to work with me, and I'm so grateful to have such wonderful Chinese colleagues. I learn from them every day, and hopefully they learn a little bit from me too. So not to sugarcoat the situation with wine, it's been very, very difficult for wineries. And I also want to point out that it's very, very difficult on the Chinese end for all the wonderful people that have supported Montara in China. And we're all very sad that the relationship is where it is, but I have hope that it's all going to be much better in the future, because Australia and China really need each other in trade. Now more than ever, after this pandemic, we all need to rebuild.
That's good advice, and I think it's going to follow on very nice the segue when we talk to Leonie, because she's very much expert on relationships and that cultural understanding, and I think both of you have indicated that. I think perhaps if I could just ask you perhaps for 1 or 2 minutes on any advice to newcomers. So Billie, if you'd like to start off with that, just the first steps,
Okay.
Any simple advice you'd like to give to anyone starting on that?
Number one, get to know your market and get to know, be a solution to a problem in the market. So if if you can see a hole or a little loophole, a little gap, try and fill that gap with something, and take a chance on China or somewhere that's difficult, because sometimes the hard work can pay off. And to really know that, WeChat is part of how you work. Like, we work possibly with emails all the time, but with my Chinese friends, we're always on WeChat. And if you don't speak the language, get someone to help you communicate, and trust. That's just my thing. Trust, and really work hard on on your trust and mutual friendship with your customers. That's my model. As it grows, it becomes more and more difficult because you've got many, many, many clients, but I still try to keep it very personal. And yeah, again, that word trust, and I have trust, and all my people in China have stood by me, and I've stood by them during this difficult time. So really just know your market. Don't be, you know, it's Australian, they're going to buy it. You're on a global world stage. You have to be competitive, and you have to be the best of the best. You've really got to put your best foot forward in that market. It's so competitive, but don't be afraid of that.
Well, that's great advice. And Sheridan, I guess you'd agree, and you're in a very, very competitive market, particularly with French brands and others. So perhaps if you had some couple of minutes for keywords of advice for those starting out.
Yeah, sure. So in a similar vein to Billie's, yeah, be the best supplier that you could possibly be. So there's lots of things that you potentially as a supplier won't be able to do for retailers or distributors or partners. But the things that you can do, really try your best at them, and even challenge the business back in Australia. If you're having issues, you always have issues with lead times. Lead times are always too long. Why is it a 9-month lead time? Can it be less? Can we give that extra bit of agility to our customers? Probably also that it is super competitive, but one of the nice surprises as well whenever we would go to a trade show is how loyal and how proud our Chinese daigous or merchants or even consumers are. They're so enthusiastic about the brand that it's what my boss likes to say, we're a little bit famous in China, because sometimes when we're at trade shows, it's really overwhelming on how proud our merchants and traders are to be working with us, which is really touching. I think probably just from a practical and from a branding point of view, keep the brand looking as an Australian brand. Don't get caught up in trying to make your brand look. You can tweak it. You're gonna have to tweak it probably a little bit, but it is still an Australian brand, and so you don't. Sometimes distributors or even online platforms will have guides that want to change the way your brand looks and make it look a bit more red and gold, and you don't need to do that. Consumers want imported brands because of how they look, and so keep your brand identity close to you, and only tweak where it makes sense. Probably just it's a little bit boring. I don't really want to talk about contracts for very long, but they are important, and especially if they'll be in Mandarin and in English. It's really obvious, but don't be signing anything that you're not comfortable signing. It does happen quite a bit, and it might just be a difference in translation. But yeah, definitely make sure that you're comfortable signing and chopping everything that you're being asked to provide, and you will be asked to provide a lot of documentation. That's just how China works. So give your finance manager and your CEO the heads up that you will be needing a certain level of documents just to open an Alipay account. You think you're borrowing millions of dollars or something. No, you're just opening up an account. But that's just how it is. So don't be daunted, just take it one document at a time. I think, and just be careful with forecasting. So you probably will get caught with, a demand of one particular SKU in China, whereas maybe your demand over Australia is spread across quite a few SKUs. You really do need to ask yourself and raise with the business, okay, if we are going to manufacture this volume for China, what are we going to do if that volume isn't needed or is is less, there is less demand in 6 or 9 months, you do need to think about the reality of that, and yeah, have some sort of plan B, and potentially be quite conservative with your forecasting. Perhaps don't manufacture to your full forecast, just to give yourself, not so you're not so exposed.
That's really good advice, and terrific segue into introducing Leonie McKeon. And Leonie's a great friend of ours. We've had her speak at some wonderful events around cultural understanding and nuances for helping businesses to succeed. Leonie is a business consultant, internationally published author, workshop presenter, keynote speaker. She's on the executive committee of ACBC South Australia, and she's a very enthusiastic supporter of our branch, and we love having her speak. So her work is based around the timeless Chinese negotiating strategies, known as the 36 strategies, derived from Sun Tzu's Art of War. Fascinating, you must read this. Her unique knowledge of Chinese business management and negotiation strategies. She's helped thousands of Western business people understand the critical underpinnings driving Chinese people's negotiating behaviour. And now it's my absolute pleasure, Leonie, to introduce you or to ask you to speak. And I do have a first question, which is, do you need to speak the language to do business? Thank you.
Well, many people don't speak the language to do business. However, I think it's a good idea to be able to at least pronounce Chinese names, Chinese places. A few words goes a long way. And for that question, that person who asked that question, I will give them a quick piece of advice. Please have a pen. If you're saying hello to a person who is of the same level as you, you can say ni hao. If you say hello to someone who is of a higher level than you, you say nin hao. So that's N-I-N-H-A-O. Now, what I've just told you will get you 100 steps further than anyone else. It is your competitive edge. Okay, so just a little bit. So there's a little bit of language there that person can go away with. But it's a good idea to pronounce names and have a few key words. However, you know, if you don't want to do that, you can get by without the language. But always a good idea. The more you know, the better off you are. So thanks for that question, and thank you very much for having me, Virginia and Jason. I do love working with ACBC Victoria. It's always been an absolute pleasure. Jason in the beginning said, you know, it's a time for us now to be better than what we were. Very true, especially in these times. Now, the more you understand China, the better off you are. Today, what I'd like to do in this time is to share with you 3 points that I believe are very important cultural points to understand how to deal with Chinese people. And these points will all fold into each other. So the first one is face. Now, face we've probably all heard about. And one of the questions that I often get asked is, Leonie, but we have face in Australia, we get embarrassed. So what's the difference? Okay, face in a Chinese environment is about how you're seen by other people. Face in a Western environment is how you see yourself. So it's very, very important about for a Chinese person, how you're seen by other people, how people see your country, how people see your product. So how this folds into what you do is that if you have a product that does give people face, if you are communicating with a Chinese person, do not ask, if you know that they don't understand what you're talking about, do not ask them, do you understand? Find another way around asking that question, because that's immediate lead into loss of face, which then breaks down the communication. So it's really important to change the way that you ask questions to give face. Giving face is about giving compliments, acknowledging festivals, acknowledging Chinese things, Chinese food. Chinese people are very, very, very proud of their food. The second thing is a concept called guanxi. Now, if you've got a pen, write it down. Guanxi, guanxi. The best translation is relationship. That's the best translation, but it's not a direct translation. So when we say relationship in a Western sense, we think, you know, husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, whatever. Relationship in a Chinese environment means business. It means business. So the better your relationship is, the better you can do business. There are sayings in Chinese culture: no relationship, no business. Friends before business. You make the friendship first, then the business. You think of the relationship, the guanxi, as like building a house. It's the foundation. You build the house and you keep building it, and you find ways of building that relationship. And it's very important that you also build this relationship with people that you want to do business with because this is the long haul. So people that you like, people that you get on with, building a house. If you have the strong foundation, you can put the renovation in, you can change the windows. If the foundation is not there, it will fall down when you put other things on. So relationship guanxi is very important. Do you talk about guanxi? No, because it's fundamental. It's a fundamental concept. You don't say, oh, I have guanxi with you, or you have guanxi with me, or I am building guanxi. No, it's a fundamental piece. So think of the relationship as something that is incredibly important. It is the first thing that you build. How do you build it? Simple ways that cost very little. Acknowledging Chinese New Year, acknowledging the Dragon Boat Festival, acknowledging the Moon Festival, a simple WeChat message, a simple email, happy Dragon Boat Festival, happy Chinese New Year, happy Moon Festival. So face and guanxi are very important. And the third thing I want to teach you or share with you are the concept of the 36 Chinese strategies. Now, I'm an expert in the 36 Chinese strategies, and I have been working on this for many, many years. The 36 Chinese strategies are strategies that are derived from Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Now, The Art of War was written 2,500 years ago. So you may ask me, of what bearing does that have on the contemporary business world? Absolutely, it is the key to understanding Chinese thinking. They're incredibly clever strategies. In fact, Sun Tzu still has the reputation of being the best strategist in the world. Now, my job over these years has been to take each strategy and provide a modern day example of each strategy so it's understood. Because like many people, I read The Art of War and I didn't understand what it meant. It's all about emperors and jumping rivers and bows and arrows and riding horses and wars. And I thought, how has this got any bearing on the business that I'm doing with China? Well, once you understand these strategies, not literally, but once you understand the code inside them, then you can understand the thinking. It's very much driven, it very much drives Chinese behavior and Chinese thinking. In fact, when I discovered the strategies, this was in the year 2000, I had 8 Chinese staff. And I went to China, discovered these strategies. It's a long story, and we don't have the time to hear about that. But I came back to Australia Monday morning and I said, have you heard of the 36 Chinese strategies? And they looked at me as if I was stupid. It's like, yeah, haven't you? They're so fundamental. And as I said, they're very, very clever. Now, what are they like? How can we understand them? All right, they're like idioms. They're like English idioms, like don't cry over spilt milk. Now, we all know that doesn't mean that someone is standing there crying and the milk is spilling. It means something different. There's a code inside it. So we cannot take don't cry over spilt milk literally, because we all know what that means. People often ask me, but Leonie, where do Chinese people learn the strategies? I say, where did you learn don't cry over spilt milk? I don't know. It just happened. That's what the strategies are about. Okay, so now because the strategies are 2,500 years old, sometimes they sound like they're from the warring times. So sometimes they sound a bit like war strategies. So when you hear them, I don't want you to think they're nasty or they're about wars. Just like Don't Cry Over Spilt Milk, they have a coding inside. Okay, so today I want to share with you strategy 3. And I'm going to also integrate Guanxi and face into that strategy to show you how it works. Okay, so strategy 3, murder with a borrowed knife. Now, as I said, don't take it literally. Murder with a borrowed knife does not mean someone is murdering someone with a borrowed knife. Okay, murder with a borrowed knife is about hierarchy. So what this means, and I at the beginning of this session, I said Nin and Ni Hao. Nin is about hierarchy. Nin Hao, that's about addressing the hierarchy, someone that's of a higher authority than you. I'll give you an example. In China, you don't call your lecturer by their first name. You would never do that. You don't call your teacher by their first name. You very rarely call your boss by their first name. So it's about hierarchy. So what this means is, when you go into a meeting or you're communicating with Chinese people or Chinese contacts, if we use our Western framework, so for example, we go into a room, we look for the person with the most authority, the boss. And generally that's the person who talks a lot, and make sure that we know that they are the person that's the boss. But in Chinese culture, the higher up you go, the least you want to be seen. So to understand this hierarchy means that the boss gives the person who is just beneath them in hierarchy the jobs, the difficult jobs, the difficult questions. They are the ones that answer the difficult questions, because the boss is conserving their energy. They're murdering with a borrowed knife. So what does this mean? It means that when you walk into a room or you are communicating with Chinese people, and you see the person who is talking the most and looks like the big boss may not be the boss. They may be the person that's just beneath them. Now, think of it like this. I'm sure many of you have played chess. The king on the chessboard is the piece that is the last piece on the chessboard, the piece that wins. But the king moves the least. The king on the chessboard is the one that moves the least. So when you are looking for the highest level person in a Chinese group, it's the person that moves the least, just like the king on the chessboard. Which means when you are making contact or communicating or trying to get a message across, do not look for the king, because the king doesn't want to move. The king gets all the other pieces to do the work. So you need to build your guanxi with the person who is beneath the person who is the king on the chessboard. And it's also important for you to give them face so that you've got a good relationship with them, because they're the ones that will get things done. It won't be the king, because they're conserving their energy. I'll give you an example of one of my clients, not to mention any names, because of course it's confidential. A furniture company. They called me and said, Leonie, we need help because we're getting furniture made in China, but we cannot seem to get the tables to be the right length, the right width. They're doing the legs too short. We just cannot get our message across. Okay, so I went into the company, we looked at all the emails, we looked at who they were communicating with, and what I worked out was they were trying to communicate with the big boss. Well, of course, the boss is conserving their energy. So what we did then was look at the other people inside the company, and we built the relationships with those people so that then they would communicate with my client. Now, we didn't just get one person, we got 3. Because that also covers your risk. Because if that person leaves, then they leave with the guanxi. Guanxi leaves with the person. It doesn't stay in the company. So in this presentation, face is how you are seen by other people, not like in a Western culture how you see yourself. Guanxi is something that you are always concentrating on building, like building a house. The more Guanxi you have, the better off you are. The more Guanxi you have, the more trust you have, the more foundation you have. And the 36 Chinese strategies are very useful to understand Chinese thinking. Just like I have shared with you, murder with a borrowed knife. They all have, fool the emperor to cross the sea. If all else fails, retreat. Wait leisurely for an exhausted enemy. Make a noise in the east and attack in the west. There's 36 of them. I have shared with you 30. I have shared with you one. There are 35 more. Okay, and I hope that those 3 points and the way that you can see how strategy 3 works will help you in your business. Thank you very much, and I welcome questions.
Thank you. That is terrific. So nothing's come up on the Q&A screen yet, but I always value your comments because they're enlightening. It takes us off to a different way of thinking of things. And I'm sure Billie was nodding. Billie, I don't know whether you'd like to make any comments because obviously you've built some very strong foundations. So if you'd like to make a quick comment, and then we'll just take any other questions that people like to put through.
Yes, I'd like to agree definitely with Leonie about definitely the strategies and the Shunju book, the Art of War. I've definitely read that as well. And relationship, yeah, definitely is. Relationship means friendship, then business. I know most of my meetings are done. I mean, obviously it's very hard with lockdowns and pandemic, but most of the time we do our business over a lunch, usually over some Chinese food on a Friday. We have lunch, we talk about our families, and then we talk about the business second. So definitely agree with Leonie there. And also just having that that person, if you are new to the market and you're starting off in the market, to have that person in China that can hold your hand through the hard bits, that's highly recommended.
That's really good advice. Now, we do have some pre-submitted questions, and some of them are quite specific. The first one is in relation to actually the Chinese control of the certification and accreditation administration of China, the CNCA, approval of pet food into China, as the majority of approved companies are owned by large multinationals. And I think, Ines, that would be something that you might be able to help us just quickly with. So how we navigate that Chinese control of the pet food industry.
I think there's like a new regulation after 2018, and I think the CNCA is not the government authority anymore. Yeah, so I think the pet food, like normally, I think it's that there's lots of like a very large company from the US, for example, like in Mars. And I think it's there's a very good opportunity for foreign pet food companies doing business through like a cross-border e-commerce that platform. I think because I think they allow those pet foods, if there is on the positive list of the cross-border e-commerce. Yeah, and yeah, I think that will be easy for them to get through on the Chinese market.
Okay. Oh, thank you. Now, a question for Leonie. I think you can help us with this. How do Australian education providers get access to the market of Chinese students in China? How do they go about that?
Well, I think probably the best way is through agents. That's the way that I have always known. Now, of course, before COVID, there were exhibitions, education exhibitions in China, and I'm sure that there would be virtual exhibitions or even hybrid exhibitions now of how you can get access to Chinese students in China. But there's several agents in China, and I would also be, you could use places like Austrade. because they have their education sector or their education portfolio in different Austrade offices, and ask them, do they have maybe a list of agents that you could contact?
Okay, that's
but Virginia, like, may I just quickly share one comment?
sure.
Yeah, so I think like actually there's quite a lot of like Australian providers, especially university. They come to China, so even they're like a university, but they can actually operate like a service woofie. I don't think I'm in a position to disclose, but actually I think it's currently like I'm kind of serving two Australian universities. It's a famous one, so I don't want to name them. Yeah, so I think it's not like just to recruit people, but they can act as the role to promote the culture, promote the their mission, and also answer questions. They do also lots of like a joint program with the university here. They can also licensing their workshop in China. So now like two students, but also can develop lots of like a market, for example, like a B2B. They can also giving like a training course to like enterprises. That's really like my personal experience, and it's still ongoing basis.
That's very helpful. Thank you. Now, there's a general question here, which I'll probably put out to all of you for some general input. It's the successful export markets in health and healthcare to China. And perhaps, Leonie, you could repeat those comments that you made earlier when we were discussing this.
Mm-hmm. Health and healthcare. I think the products that are very sought after in China are relating to aged care, where you'll have, say, a product and it has a digital application. Everything needs to have a digital application. That's very, very popular in China, very sought after. So it could be, I mean, I'm not an engineer, but it could be, some kind of a frame where it has some kind of a digital application to help people through that aged care process. Of course, there's vitamin pills and skin care and all that kind of thing, but I would be going down the digital application road in Meditech, that kind of thing, because Australia is quite famous for innovation, and we do have a lot of companies that, even small biotech companies that have some excellent products. Also, one of the things that I say the perfect marriage, because it is, when you have a relationship in China with a Chinese business partner, it is like that. It is such a strong partnership. The thing that is very useful is that most Chinese companies are able to commercialize very well. And quite often with Australia, one of the things that we do very well is research. However, we can sometimes research for the sake of research. So when you have that perfect marriage where you've got the research company and the Chinese company can partner and commercialize. So what I'm saying is, if someone has something that has a digital application and they keep researching and researching and researching, to look for a Chinese partner to partner up, and then they're very good at commercializing the intellectual property. So if that works really well, it's a great relationship.
Well, that's good advice. Thank you. Now, Jason, maybe if I could ask just a question for you, is what help does the Victorian government have out there to help exporters get involved in the China market? We'll make that our last question if you could address that for us. Thanks.
Sure. Look, there are a number of different channels, I suppose, that people can access to get help from the Victorian government. One of them is me, contacting me as the manager of the China desk. The other one is contacting our Victorian Government Trade and Investment Network over in China. We've got 5 offices in China, led out of Shanghai by Brett Stevens, who's the Commissioner for Victoria to China. And they are there to help you with all of your China queries. Sometimes it's easier for people to contact me, and I'm very happy to sort of take those contacts. Other ways that you can access Victorian government programs, I suppose, is use the skilling programs which we have available. One of them we're in right now, Global Victoria Women. We have a number of different webinars, training programs, skills programs available, and more about that can be found on our website. One of the recent things, Virginia, I'll give a bit of a cross promotion here for you and for the ACB and us for in Global Victoria, is the Global Alliance program, where we are partnering with Chambers of Commerce and those which deal with international markets. And for example, we have partnered with the ACBC to put forward a whole suite of programs coming up this year on webinars, how to get exports going, what sort of difficulties you'll face, covering, I suppose, some bits and pieces of the material we've heard today, but other things which are a bit more specific and niche for different industries. Also on our website, you can see the information we've got on virtual trade missions, export skills programs, and also contacts for the VGTIs. But in all of these things, we seek to, in some cases, have experts bring material, but in other cases, exactly like today, get experts who have experience actually doing the job. I mean, all of the people we've heard from today have worked in China, worked with China, and the more we can actually develop networks and we have people with experience sharing their skills with people who are interested in starting out as exporters, the better. So if we can facilitate that, we're very happy to, but we're also open to contacts, questions. And if I can't help someone, or if the VGTI can't help someone, that's our offices in China, then we will find someone who can help you. Sometimes we refer them to you, Virginia, in the ACBC Victoria, because of the great work you do.
Oh, well, thank you very much. I'll take all that praise. Thank you so much. And thank you very much to all our speakers. We've come to the end of our session, and I do hope that our participants have enjoyed it. Huge thanks to all of you, to Ines for zooming in from Shanghai and Leonie from South Australia. We're a very international group today, which is lovely. And you've shared some terrific insights and that practical knowledge. I hope that all our guests feel a little more knowledgeable and about the opportunities with the China export market. If today has sparked some ideas from you and you want to get in touch with any of our speakers, the contact details will be coming along to you in an email after this event, together with the recording of the session. So please, stay connected, reach out, be part of the ACBC family, and we'll be happy to help you. Our sincere thanks to Global Victoria, Jason, to you for your continuing support, and to Daniela and her team for the terrific work that she does for Global Women Victoria. With increased global tensions, these sorts of events are really important to keep the connections going and reconsider how the business community can help rebuild the bilateral communication through all sorts of interaction. We have another event coming up very shortly next week on the cultural importance of sport, and we hope that our guests will join us for that. We will be sending you a complimentary link, so please feel free to zoom in to watch that. And in closing, I just want to thank everyone again, our speakers, and also our guests for attending. So thank you all, and we'll see you soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Virginia.
Bye. Thanks,
so much,
Virginia.
Virginia.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.